Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa alihi at-tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajam. Tonight is going to be more introductory for us to warm up a little bit, no pun intended. You know, it's cold outside and the heater's not working, so we had to put these up, these little space heaters here. But alhamdulillah, that's not a problem. Just when you want to start, the weather goes bad, you know. Anyway, so this is going to be an introductory session. We just want to know what we're going to be doing and what to expect. So I'm going to give an overview of everything, but first, a few points before I get into the actual book. And that is my story. I want to share with you my story a little bit first. When I went to Qom, I went for one purpose only, and that was this. Really, it was actually this book right here when I went to Qom. And growing up in America, you know, we would hear lectures of Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, didn't understand anything of it, right? None of it was understandable to me. I still remember I went to the Salatul Jummah, he was speaking. Ayatollah Jawadi, the one that's on the flyer, you know, the picture of that scholar that's on the flyer for this class actually. And so I went to Jummah, he was the Imam of the Jummah, and he was speaking, and I had just gone to Iran. I mean, my Farsi wasn't anything great, and so I didn't understand anything of what he was saying. I was like, will a day come that I understand what he's saying? Fast forward like 10, 12, 15 years, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my God, remember that day when this happened? This is one of his books. And I still remember, I was in my second year of Hawza, and I was telling my friend who was senior to me, I was like, I want to work on this book, but I don't understand it. He's like, we can start, you know, studying it together. And but never went through it actually, because I was introduced to a real living scholar of Akhlaaq. And so we spent our years going to him. When it comes to Akhlaaq, and when we say Akhlaaq, that's a term that's used very broadly. Okay, sometimes it can refer to etiquettes and adab. Yeah, sometimes it refers to the mustahabbat of things. Sometimes it refers to spiritual wayfaring and spirituality and stuff like that. And that's what this book is all about. And that's what usually people are interested in and are looking for. The thing is that when it comes to akhlaq, when it comes to spiritual wayfaring, there is an active ingredient, or there are some active ingredients that actually push you in the right direction and allow you to make gains spiritually. There are other things that are seen as akhlaq or spiritual wayfaring, but they're not actually the active ingredient. What are they? They are giving you an understanding of how it works. Okay? They are giving you an understanding of what this journey looks like. What are the things that are supposed to happen for a person who is traversing this path and this is on this journey, right? This book and the likes of this book will not tell you, okay, now is the time to do this, now is time to do that. If you're at this level, do this. If you're at that level, do that. What this book is the journey in words. What is to expect? What is to be expected of a person who's trying to traverse this path? What are some of the obstacles? What are some of the ways to remove these obstacles that get in the way of one growing spiritually? And then finally, it talks about things that it's not supposed to talk about, which are the actual levels that these people, spiritual wayfarers, go through. What they experience. Not what they see, no, what they feel as their faith, as their iman is strengthened more and more. Okay? These things, sometimes it might be better not to share it with people. Do you know why? Because it's like that kid who watches a motivational workout video, sees people that are like 15 years into body building and training, and they want to be like that person, and they will go overboard to get to that sooner. It takes a long time, it takes a lifetime. Now, spiritual growth versus physical growth is much harder. And that's why I'm not a very spiritual person myself. So we're going to be reading this together. The good thing about it is that it gives us an overview of how things kind of look on this path of spiritual growth, right? And so tonight, I want to share with you what is in this book. Just go through the table of contents, which is like 400 pages actually. This itself is going to take a while. But before that, let me just make sure that there's anything I missed. Yes. One more thing is that not everything will apply to us that's in this book as well. We have to understand. And that's why I will begin with the formula for spiritual growth. I will begin with that. If a person is not living up to that formula, this is going to be kind of a waste of time. Yes? It's not going to help. It'll give you a good feeling. It'll give you a spiritual high, let's call it. But it's not going to do the work. There are people who will know these things. There will be people who will ask you questions or ask me questions about things I haven't even heard of before. But that person might not be very high because spiritually. Why? Because the formula is not being adhered to. The formula is very, very clear. And I wish I had brought the books with me. I didn't. Books of letters of scholars to people who would ask them questions about spiritual growth. When you look at those letters, in those letters you will find that the one thing that is common in all of them, or even if it's not mentioned in those letters, but it's a given, it's seen as something that's, of course, it's a given, everyone knows this much, is the matter of taqwa in the sense of the wajib and haram. If someone wants to spiritually grow, the wajib and haram are the glue that allow other things to stick to this person and work and do what they need to do. Or else, wajib haram is not taken care of, none of this is going to work. None of this is going to help. That's number one. In addition to that, once wajib and haram is taken care of, yes, once wajib and haram is taken care of, a person is confident now that they've reached that point where no more sinning is taking place deliberately. Sometimes it'll happen, yes, we'll make mistakes, we're not ma'soom, they get back up on their feet, but an active effort is being made to make sure that everything is in accordance with the sharia and the law of God. Once that's taken care of, then these ulama that have gone this path will tell you there are certain mustahabbat also that you add to that list of things, one after another. And it gets pretty hard. It gets pretty hard. Sometimes you get this feeling that, and you won't find this part in books, by the way. Not too many books out there that will talk about the practical side of things. But sometimes you get this feeling that these greats, they want to make you understand that no matter how much you do, it's not enough, and you kind of lose hope in your own actions. And you develop this more, let's call it reliance on God, that He takes your hand. Sometimes along the way, we will get this feeling that it is my ibadah, it's my worship that's going to get me somewhere. That itself is shirk. We'll talk about that. It talks about it in the book as well. But having said all of that, that's the formula. It's very simple. It's very simple. Just like a person who wants to stay fit, they just have to clean up their diet and just do some cardio throughout the day. That's about it till the rest of their life. That's enough for them. They will be in shape, inshallah. Yes, at least 80% in shape. Yeah. Same very simple formula for spiritual growth. That's it. That's it. But if a person doesn't have that, then all of this is a waste of time, in my opinion. And that's why when that second year of Hawza that I was telling you about, when I went to my friend with this book, I was like, I want to look at this, I want to read this, I want to learn this, but it's too hard for me. After a while, I put it away, actually. Now's the first time I'm picking it up again. After how many years? 3, 2, 5, about 17, 18 years, I'm picking this book up again. I'll explain what the book is. No, it's not in English, or else you wouldn't be here.
No, but the back page is in English.
Oh yeah, that's what we do in Iran. We put the back in English, so everyone thinks that there's an English part. No, it's just the back cover. This one doesn't have it. So this book is one book of a series of books. This is number 11. Of Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli. This is a thematic tafsir series he has. Tafsir sometimes is tafsir sometimes goes according to verses of the Quran and surahs. Sometimes no, it goes by themes. It's thematic, which means this theme of the Quran, what does the Quran say about it? And they'll write a thematic tafsir on that concept. For example, one of them will be the seerah of the Prophet in the Quran, thematic tafsir. I don't know which volume that is. I was going to bring those two, it's just too much. So I have 5 or 6 of them. There's a good number of them. Seerah of the Holy Prophet in the Quran. I don't know, volume number 4, for example. Quran dar Quran. The Quran in the Quran. That's the first volume, right? That's also a thick a book itself. Yeah, all of these different things. Then you'll have number 10, which is the preliminary concepts of akhlaq, or the philosophy of akhlaq. That one is a deep one. Like, I picked it up and I put it back down. I said this is not for us. But number 11 has more to do with, as I said, it gives you that map, it gives you that outline of how things are supposed to look, where the place of everything is. What is that order and logical sequence of things when it comes to akhlaq and akhlaqi growth and spiritual growth. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, so this is Ayatul Jawadi's thematic tafsir series. Number 11 is this one that we're covering, Marahila Akhlaq, the Quran. And once again, we have two things here, two terms here, Marahil, Akhlaq, which I explained both. Akhlaq is used in different ways. Here, when you look through the book, he doesn't use the word akhlaq as much as the word Sayru Suluk. Yes, Sayru Suluk is a word that's used a lot in Farsi for spiritual wayfaring. It means spiritual wayfaring. So akhlaq, when he says here marahila akhlaq, the marahil is the plural of marhala, which means is that Urdu too?
Stage.
Yeah, stage, right? Stages of really it's spiritual wayfaring, I would call it. So akhlaq here, you can tell he's using it in the narrower sense of the term, which is spiritual wayfaring, because he keeps repeating that word in the different chapters here. He's also written this book based on another book's sequence. The great Khaja Nasiruddin al-Tusi, he has a book on spiritual wayfaring. He has written this book based on that book. That book is called
Syrian ethics.
Oh wow, really? This in English?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Awsaf al-Ashraf it's called. So they've kind of they haven't translated it, but that's what it is. Probably the same book.
Yeah, attributes of the noble.
Yeah, Awsaf al-Ashraf, attributes of the noble ones. Yeah. So what was it? That was Nasirian ethics, huh? So they're attributing to Nasir.
Yeah, there's a book called Nasirian ethics, but
Mm.
this one, the exact translation is attributes
Attributes
the
of
noble.
the noble ones. Oh, there's another book too that's been translated to English.
Yes.
Oh wow, okay, I didn't know that. Yeah, so he's based it on this, but he has critique of that book as well and the sequence that is there. So he's incorporated all of that into this volume of his work. Okay, so I'm going to go through this, and we're going to spend our time tonight going through what to expect from A to Z. Hopefully we have enough time to go through all of it. As I said, tonight might go a little over, but we're going to try to keep it between 30 to 40 minutes. So because people have lives. Someone said people have lives and wives. So I said it's the same thing. My wife is my life, right? That's what we are told to say. So people have lives to get to, so we don't want to take too much of your time. It's a close drive, so no one's going to come and say, oh, it was only 30 minutes, not worth it. We want 3-hour program or something. No, it's close by. Just come, Assalamu alaikum, Hazrat, let's do a couple pages, let's go, that kind of thing. Just get a dose. I'm sorry for the ones who are coming from farther out. You're not going to get your drive's worth, but forgive me on that. All right. He has divided the book into 3 parts and sections. Section 1 is the obstacles of, you see right here, he doesn't say akhlaq anymore. He says mawani' nazari wa amaliya sayru suluk. He says the mawani' and the obstacles of sayru suluk, spiritual wayfaring. So that's the first section. I'll go through the details later. Second section, the stages of removing the obstacles of spiritual wayfaring. And then number 3, it's talking about the maqamat and those the levels and the high ranks of the urafa and the stages of actual spiritual wayfaring, where it becomes, it's just talk. We'll go through it. It becomes talk. People have to experience it. It's not something that we can really talk about, but they're sharing with us whatever they have, so we thank them for that as well. All right, so let's go. Section number 1. He says he has 7 chapters here. The first one being Ghafla. Ghafla means what? Heedlessness and negligence. It's different than Nisyan. Nisyan means forgetfulness, right? Sometimes you know something, you forget it. Sometimes you know something's very important, yet you still forget it. Yeah? That's one thing. Sometimes you don't even understand the importance of something. That's negligence. There's a difference between Nisyan and Ghafla. So Ghafla, he says, Cherke Jan, it's the filth of the soul. If that is not taken care of, then then we're in big trouble. We're asleep. So he goes through different things regarding that for about 20, 30 pages. And the different levels of awakening as well. So for him, there isn't just one level of awakening, there's many levels of awakening. He talks about ghafla in ibadah. He talks about the solution to this. He talks about dhikr and how important dhikr is and so on, and some other things that I'm skipping right now. That's in the chapter on ghafla. Then he goes into the whispers, academic whispers, waswasaya ilmi. And there he talks about how certain knowledge can sometimes cause a problem for us. Yeah. So knowledge is always good in and of itself, but our perception of that can sometimes be a problem for us, although that knowledge is divine knowledge even. The knowledge of the religion even, it might be. But it can cause problems. The third one is, he calls it being delusional. Yeah. It talks about living in an illusion in this world, in this life. Talks about the origin of this, being delusional and seeing things the way they're not seeing things the way they really are. Talks about the results of this and what this entails and the problems it entails. And he gives some examples as well. Fourth chapter talks about the intellect and the mind. And he says, look, I'll just say this much for this one. I'm just saying all this so you guys know what to look forward to, because I'm pretty excited. I want to see what he says about these things. I took a look at it. He says that the aql and the mind, sometimes at a certain level of a person's spiritual wayfaring, is aql. But once that person moves on to the next level of spiritual growth, that aql becomes iqal. Iqal is that thing they use to tie a camel's knees so it can't walk anymore. So aql sometimes gets in the way of a person's growth if they've outgrown that level of aql. What does that even mean? And I hope he opens these up more, but let's see how much he does. And then he talks about the battle and the war between aql and the qalb, between love and intellect. There's a whole battle between love and intellect. He covers that as well. All right, that's chapter number 4. Chapter number 5, he talks about egotism and being nafs-centered. And this one, he dedicates a lot of pages to this one. He talks about how the minor jihad and struggle is a preliminary step to the major one. He talks about different things. He comes down to making haqq the center of our life and not the khud, the me, the I. He talks about the stupidity of a person who is self-centered. Yes, and is egotistic. Talks about how it's stupidity even. Talks about the wilayah of Allah versus the wilayah of shaitan. Talks about the fate of those who have this self-centeredness and the outcomes of that. And then finally ends with the grace of Allah. 6th chapter talks about the hiding places of shaitan and where he ambushes us. First he talks about fighting shaitan. He talks about satanic freedom. Freedom can sometimes be satanic. He talks about what the sign is that we're actually winning in that battle we're having with shaitan. What are the signs for that? How do I know I'm getting it right? He talks about other things. The last part was pretty cool too. He talks about the student and the teacher of shaitan. Sometimes the student learns things better than the teacher and becomes better than the teacher. So the point he makes there is that sometimes shaitan is your teacher, but it reaches a point that now you teach shaitan. Yeah. So these are all still in the first section, right? These are some of the obstacles. And then he finally talks about materialism and just being too much in love with the dunya. Talks about refraining from salt water. We've all heard the hadith of the dunya being like salt water. The more you drink it, the thirstier you get. Yeah. And then he talks about the greatest obstacle of suluk and spiritual wayfaring, which is the dunya. And then he talks about developing angelic, let's call it, traits and being like the angels. And another birth for us, being born again. And a lot of other things. Talks about the unknown teachers of man. Who are those teachers of ours that we don't even know there are teachers when it comes to spiritual wayfaring apparently? All this under that final chapter of section 1. Okay, so that's section 1. Section number 2 talks about getting rid of some of the obstacles and being ready, I guess you can call it, for actual spiritual wayfaring. And it starts with what, he says? It starts with tawbah. So first chapter is on tawbah. But he has some terms here again that even I'm not too familiar with. And these are the parts that might not apply, these are the things that might not apply to us sometimes because they're too hard. But just knowing them might help in some way or be motivational in one way or another. It talks about general tawbah and repentance. Then specific, khas, repentance. And then tawbah akhas, even more specific tawbah. So there's like 3 levels of tawbah. What are they? We'll have to see. How tawbah is a return to the Sirat al-Mustaqim, quality and quantity of tawbah, and so on. Then he goes to number 2, zuhd. Zuhd, what is the definition of zuhd? What is the sign of zuhd? We always hear this word. The levels of zuhd. This one is pretty interesting. I like this one. I actually read this one before and I liked it, the way he looks at it. Zuhd in zuhd. To have zuhd of zuhd. What does that mean? That's like an oxymoron. To have zuhd of zuhd. Yeah. The fruits of dusting the heart, he calls the next one. Sitting with those whose hearts are sick. Yeah, that's part of zuhd, to not sit with those whose hearts are sick. You know, not just detaching from some of the glittery stuff here, but even the people sometimes we have to stay away from. And then refining the heart, he talks about as well. So that's chapter number 2 of section 2. I'm reading all of this so you know what's coming. Yes. And so that if you feel like this is not for you, you don't have to necessarily wait to see where we get to. These are the things that we'll be covering, inshallah. Number 3, riyada. Riyada means to train. Yeah, it means to train yourself. In Farsi, we call those Hindu gurus, we call them murtaz. It comes from the same word riyaza, which means to train. You know, that vigorous training that you have is riyazat. In Arabic, riyada means sports. So you see, they're all linked together. Okay.
We can achieve those traits with riyada without being spiritual.
I thought you were going to say we can achieve it with sports. I thought you were going to say. No, we'll see. We'll see what he's talking about there. He says this is one of those. He says this is not even a thing that takes you up. This is getting rid of obstacles. Yeah. So we're still not even there yet. Yeah. As I said, the formula is what matters that we talked about in the beginning. The formula. Once we have that taken care of, this is just icing on the cake. I'll read through all of this. I might not even do any of this. But I still have that formula. Allah will take me through all of this, inshallah. Whether I like it or not. Right? We just want to get an idea. We want more motivation. We want to have a little boost once a week, just talk a little bit akhlaaq, Yeah, so and he talks about the role of practice when it comes to akhlaqi issues in our lives. What a role practice plays. Just because you didn't get it the first time doesn't mean you give up. No, practice makes perfect, inshallah. Chapter number 4, muraqaba and muhasaba. And we've all heard this one. Muraqaba means to be vigilant and to be careful every step of the way. And muhasaba means to go over what we've done in the past and do some calculation, see what we did wrong, what we did right, how we can repeat the good, how we can get in the way of the bad, and so on. He talks about what the Quran says about that, and he says some other things too here. That's about 10 pages for that. And then finally he talks about taqwa, and then taqwa is a different take on it than other teachers that I've seen. He has a different take, but he says in the beginning he says that I am going to give you the taqwa that Khaja Nasruddin at-Tusi gives. Yeah, right there in the beginning of the chapter he says, Muhaqqiq at-Tusi says this. And so he'll explain it the way he sees it. It's a different type of taqwa that you've grown accustomed to hearing about, which has to do with the wajib and haram of Allah and refraining from the haram and observing the wajibat. There's some other things he adds to that, which you might maybe call higher levels and degrees of taqwa. So that's section number 2. Section number 2, getting us ready for section number 3. I don't even know if we'll get this far before it's cancelled, or before you stop coming or I stop coming. Yeah? But if we get here, after 200 something pages. And I will skip some parts. Some parts I'll feel that, are not too relevant. I will skip those parts. Number 3, the part that I'm looking forward to the most. And maybe in another life that we have, when we're doing this book again, we'll skip the first 2 sections and we'll just start with section number 3. Right? But in this life right now, apparently we're going to go through this one as well, these first 2 sections. The 3rd section is the maqamat. Is those ranks. Is what these people actually go through and experience and feel. Now, is it they're going to see angels and things like that? No, it's other things. Yeah? First thing, he has an introduction where he talks about what does it even mean to grow spiritually? What kind of movement is this? He talks about how it's a vertical movement, but then he explains what vertical means. He says sometimes you're in this dunya, you might even move vertically from one destination to another, but in the grander scheme of things, from an irfani perspective, that vertical motion was actually a horizontal motion. Only vertical motion that you have in the world of irfan and akhlaq, the only vertical motion that you have is the one that philosophy talks about, which is you actually growing into something else. That is a vertical movement. Other than that, it's not vertical. It's all horizontal. That means you're not making any progress. Yeah? And then he talks about how this spiritual growth in different schools of thought might be different. From a theological perspective, akhlaqi growth means one thing. From a philosophical one, from an irfani one, it all has different meanings. And I'm thinking that he's going to probably share with us his understanding of what growth actually is. Alright, but what are these levels? He says level number 1 is Iman. Iman, he explains that Iman, in my opinion, is not one of the first stages. It's preliminary. But then he explains. He says the only reason that we brought it though is because At-Tusi brought it in his book. So we'll explain it and everything, but in reality it's not one of those stages. It actually starts with some other things. So he goes on. Number 1 is Iman. What does he talk about that? He talks about the tranquility of the heart and body of a mu'min. He talks about how Iman can sometimes be mixed with shirk. You can be mu'min, but you can be mushrik at the same time. I've talked about this before here and there. He talks about how shirk in reality is the root of all sins. Okay? Now, not that if I sin that I believe in some idol. There's an explanation to that. Mushrikane akhlaqi he also talks about. Akhlaqi mushriks. It's interesting, never heard of that one before. You might hear like mushrik Molana, but you never hear akhlaqi mushrik. Alright. And then how the mu'mineen are free of all shirk. He talks about all of these things. And then he talks about thubat or thabat, which means steadfastness. That's number 2. Number 3, niyyah, intention. Number 4, sidq, truthfulness. Now this doesn't mean don't lie. It means something else. We'll get to it. Inaba, number 5. Inaba means disconnecting from all except for Allah. Number 6, he talks about ikhlas and purification of the intention that we have, or more than that even. I haven't looked at this one. He talks about people who sit for 40 days and do something for 40 straight days. How the hadith talks about how hikmah and wisdom will flow from their tongues and from them as a result of continuously doing something for 40 days. We'll see if he points out or not, if he believes that 40 itself has importance or not. Can it be 41 days? Is it 40 here just signifying, repetition? What is it exactly? Let's see if he covers that. Yeah, and then he talks about ikhlas pendari, when we think that there's ikhlas, but there isn't ikhlas. Yeah. And that's an important one. I have stuff to say there too. And then number 7, isolation, khalwa, isolation. Talks about isolation and tahajjud, staying up at night, for ibadah. Talks about isolation while you're in the middle of society. Does isolation mean that I get up and go in the mountains? It talks about the secret ingredient of khalwa and isolation. It talks about the isolation of the Holy Prophet. Well, the Holy Prophet was amongst the people, so what kind of isolation are we talking about here? It must mean something special. And then he talks about how waking up before Fajr has what it has to do with our daily affairs and the daily life that we have throughout the day. That's number 7, isolation. Isolation is one of those important ones, I'll tell you right now. Isolation in its real sense, not the one that you go into the mountains or something. No, no, no. This is special. And I've seen people who were there amongst us, but you could tell they were isolated. Yeah, and they were interesting people. Tafakkur, number 8. Reflection. He talks about the main things that you have to keep in mind when you have reflection and tafakkur. Closed-mindedness he talks about. So if there's tafakkur and reflection, you have to be aware of closed-mindedness at the same time. And what the fruit of this tafakkur can be if it really is done properly. This reflection is really done. What are we supposed to reflect over? What are we supposed to do? That's number 8. Number 9 is fear and grief. Both have a good version and a bad version, he says. So we got to figure that part out as well. Some people, they feel that, the more grief they have, the more fear of Allah they have, it's good. Well, we'll see. Is that the case or not? What is the threshold? What is that red line? Where after that, no, we're in trouble. We're not supposed to have that much fear. We're not supposed to have that much grief. On the flip side, some people don't have it at all. They're too jolly. Is that good? Is that not good? Let's see if he talks about those things. That's number 8. On the flip side, raja, number 10. Raja, which is hope. The raja of a salik, what's it supposed to look like? A spiritual wayfarer's hope, what's it supposed to look like? Is it just like every other person's hope? Number 11, sabr and patience. Number 12, shukr, gratitude to Allah. 13, irada, willpower. 14, shawq. Okay, slowly we're getting into the things that I don't know what I'm talking about anymore, okay? Here it starts. Number 14 is shawq. We all know what shawq means, right? Ishtiyaq, shawq, mushtaq. Do we have that word?
Yeah.
What's the English for it? Where are you, sister? Shawq. When you have shawq, no, it's more than interest. You long for something, passion. Shawq, passion. Number 15, mahabba, love. True love versus false love. Having love to the other people who are creation of Allah, he discusses as well. You can't not have love towards them, even if they're bad people. And then be in love with Allah, he says. I think he's going to probably say that. Number 16, ma'rifah. The different levels of ma'rifah. The Quran inviting us to ma'rifah. The ma'sumin inviting us to ma'rifah. And by the way, as we go through all of these, we have to see and give ourselves this reality check that over all these years that we've been doing Islamic work, how much are we focusing on these matters? It's very important as well. If we're not doing it right, then we have to think of a change or make a change. Number 17, yaqeen. What is ilmul yaqeen? What is haqqul yaqeen? These are things I'm scared of. I don't even want to get to this part. I don't know. What are the outcomes of yaqeen? What does yaqeen entail? Number 18 is sukoon, tranquility. You see, this is what they're going through. The different types and categories of sukoon. When I'm in that wayfaring and that motion towards my destination, what if I get some instability? So instability while I'm in motion. He talks about that. What about the tranquility that comes after instability? He talks about that. Yeah. As I said, I don't even know what that means. We have to see. Tawakkul, number 19. Number 20, rida. Yes, rida means satisfaction. 21, taslim, submission. 22, tawheed. So 22, I always thought we all had tawheed, right? Or else we're not Muslim, right? Why is number 22 tawheed? Okay, if that's number 22, then what? Then that's the highest, right? That's God and tawheed and the oneness of God. There must be nothing after that, right? He says no. 23 is ittihad. Okay, so tawheed in Arabic is a verb that is an infinitive of a verb that you do. When you tawheed, that means when you do tawheed of somebody, that means you wahadahu, that means you make him one. Right? When I do something, what does that imply regarding somebody else? When I look at somebody as one and I see them as one, right? There's a me and there is a him, and I am making him one. That's a problem because there's a me still. So Tawheed is 22, but 23 is Ittihad. It's not me pointing to him, he's one. Now Ittihad means oneness of two things. They're stuck together actually. Right? So I'm not pointing to him anymore. Right? But then that's the highest, right? No. Then you have 24, which is Wahda. Oneness. That means it's only him apparently. Not even me. These are things we have to get to. These can be experienced. I'm sitting here talking away. But and sometimes people get away with this. They talk about these things and people are like, oh my God, he must be very spiritual. No, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay? But these are these three levels: Tawheed, Ittihad, Wahda. It reaches a point where you, he says, Maqam Fana. Look at that. That's the last one on the list. So you know what you're talking about, huh? Yes, Maqam. Yeah. So under Wahda, apparently another term for that is Fana. Yeah. Which is self-annihilation. Not that you go up and say Allahu Akbar. No. None of that. What is meant here is that you have you're there but you're not there anymore. You have dissolved in Allah's existence. As if, just like how, when you dissolve sugar into tea, the sugar is there but it's not there, as if. Something like that. I don't know how much he's going to talk about these. I think he's going to keep it it doesn't look like he spends too much talking about them. But these are the maqamat of the arifin according to Muhaqqiq at-Tusi's categorization and the sequence that he has and that Ayatul Jawadi has followed. As I said, he has some critiques to this, but all in all, he wouldn't have gone by it if he doesn't accept it himself. So we're going to go through all of these, inshallah, starting next week. As I said, and I'm ending now. First of all, I'm going to try my best to start on the dot. Today we started 7:30 on the dot. And what time is it now? 8:07. So we've been going on for 37 minutes. So like, as I said, between 30 to 40 minutes, we're going to sit together and just go over this. The poster says it has 5 dates on it, the poster, right? For those of you who weren't here in the beginning, these will just be continuously going weekly, every week. Because it's on a Tuesday night. Usually there's nothing going on anywhere on a Tuesday night, right? Except for Mizan Live before this. And so it can be consistent, inshallah. That's what I'm hoping for, that it can stay consistent. So that's just up to winter break. After winter break, we'll put out the actual flyer for, weekly until whenever, until Yawm al-Qiyamah, inshallah. We'll go on until we can finish this or get as much we can out of it, inshallah. Are there any questions before I end? Yes.
What's this Khums course happening?
I don't know. You have to tell us. I'm going to end. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.
Let me tell him so.